Well, I don't know if you could tell there, David, I was a little excited to be in that cradle of liberty.
Such
in
a
that
cool
very
place
room.
to be.
Yeah.
It
And
is
you've
such a
recorded
cool
there
place.
several times. It's just something
a cool
about being
place.
where it happened.
And it's, you know, I always love looking back at George Washington's chair, and that, you know, was it the rising sun or the setting sun on that chair, and I think, boy, you know, Franklin, that's such a cool story with that. But it's cool to be in that room.
I love it. So one of the things we talked about a lot, and we'll talk about a lot more throughout this course, is original intent.
Right.
Now, you wrote an entire book on this, a best-selling book on original intent, where you took all these documents in this room and really shared with us what was inside the minds of our founding fathers. Why is it so important to get that original intent?
Because that's where you get the most effectiveness. It's really hard to use a screwdriver as a shovel because it was not designed for that. So you can work all day long with a screwdriver and dig something out. You have to know original intent, have to know how it's designed. It's like using the owner's manual. If you want the most out of your car, your TV, anything else,
Now, you're not saying people would misuse the Constitution and for
not.
something it wasn't intended to be used for.
You know how we talked at the beginning about human nature and principles,
Yeah.
and that's why the Constitution works, because it's based on certain principles. One of those principles is human nature, and absolutely it can be. And we'll cover this in future lessons, but that's why we have checks and balances and separation of powers, and the Founding Fathers told us about human nature, and because of that they put principles in there to keep people from taking and abusing this. It won't stop it if we don't apply those principles,
Yeah.
but they gave us some tools by which we can stop some
I
abuse.
like that analogy, because now not just original intent, but original intended use. It's a good way to think of it.
It is. It is. And one of the things that's kind of a good example that you talked about, if we don't do that right then, you're talking about how we get off track, and you're exactly right. Here's a great example. This is one of the best-selling books in American history. It's one of the McGuffey Readers. They came out in 1830s and 40s and went through 120 million copies to this date. So, I mean, they have sold like crazy. So here is a fourth grade reader. And I just open up here to lesson number 9, Death at the Toilet. Wait a minute.
I have no idea. Yeah.
Why would they use such crude bathroom humor back in that day? Because back in that day, toilet is where we get the word toiletries, which is like your shaving stuff and your hair stuff. And well, toilet was really your vanity table, and that's why we call it vanity. So death at the toilet is death at the vanity table. And it deals with a young girl who was really cocky and pride and arrogant about how beautiful she was, and it turned into her demise.
Wow.
Well, we look at death at the toilet and say, I can't believe that you're such crude humor. No, you have to go back to understand what they were trying to do. Now, once we understand that, the principle's the same. The arrogance and the cockiness and the kind of stuff that they talk about with that girl, but it's not death at the toilet, it's death at the vanity table. Her vanity is what destroyed her. So that's the kind of stuff that still works, and it does have an impact. And that's why you want to go back and know original intent. We'll just go back where we started at the beginning with John Jay. These are the 6 things that we want every single citizen to be able to do. When you read and study the Constitution, number 1 is read the Constitution. Doesn't take 20 minutes, it's an easy thing to do. Number 2 is study the Constitution. Once you've read it, you kind of get the overview. Now go back and look at the things in it and start making the list.
And that's where we really are getting into the minds of the founders.
That's right.
We're studying what those words actually mean, not just reading them.
And as we go through these next lessons, these other lessons, we're going to be studying what that meant and why they put that there and why that clause is there and what are they trying to do. So
is that why all of these books are important? Not just the words of the Constitution, but when you pull a book off the shelf that is one of these guys in this picture that helped give us the document, it gives you a chance to really find out what they were thinking when they did it.
And it helps set the tone of the times. If you understand, you know, people accuse the Pilgrims all the time of being so bloodthirsty because they had the death penalty. So they did. They had 15 crimes that had the death penalty. But let's set the tone of the time. When they came to America from Great Britain, the country they left had the death penalty for over 230 crimes. So they've taken it from 230 death penalty crimes down to 15. I don't think they're bloodthirsty.
So that puts it in context.
Puts it in context.
If you just look at it by itself, you could get way off. But if you step back and see the big picture,
and that is the thing, you can get fixated on a particular issue, and you see so much of the trees, you miss the forest.
Yeah.
And that's why you read it to see the forest. Now let's go back and study some of the trees that are in the forest, and that's the second part. Third part is to be able to teach it. Once you see what's in there, teach it, especially the rising generation. But in this culture, with our poor education
it's
system,
all of us.
Teach all of us.
Yeah.
Teach. I love. There's a Bible verse in Song of Solomon 8:13 that says, "Your friends listen to your voice, so speak." Exactly. There, in this day and time, with what we have with social media, there's nobody who doesn't have a platform.
That's a good point.
There are people who will listen to you. There are people who will hear what you say on Facebook, do it on Twitter, whatever you got. speak.
Might be 5 people, might be 5,000, but all of us have some
whatever
folks
you
we
got,
can influence.
you talk to your friends,
Yeah.
and that makes a difference. Then what you want to be able to do is know those constitutional rights. Now that you've read and studied and you started teaching them, you now recognize when somebody has crossed the line. Wait a minute, he can't do that. That's not constitutional. And then at that point, you can defend those rights. If they're coming after you, or if they're coming after somebody else, you can assert those rights.
Yeah.
So you stand up, and those are the 6 things that everybody needs to be able to do with the Constitution.
So you can't have that perception. You won't know that those rights have been violated if you haven't done these first steps
that's
first.
right.
You got to study them and know.
See, I mean, you talked in there about how your mom, when they trained her as a bank teller, they didn't show her counterfeit stuff. They just let her handle the real stuff so much that she instantly recognized it. And we did the same thing in World War II. If you wanted to be able to recognize the enemy, you studied those enemy identification charts. So you studied all the enemy planes, all the enemy tanks. So when you saw it, you read, that's the enemy. Now we can defend and assert ourselves. We're going on offense.
Yeah.
You want to make sure you didn't get one of the Allied tanks. You know, you didn't want one of the British tanks. So you studied. And once you studied, you could recognize when there was something wrong.
Yeah.
And that's what it takes.
Well, as we study, you know, sometimes people today, I mean, if we're not doing a good job of this in our schools, then that means we need more tools. We've got to have the tools to be able to study and know
by the
those
way,
things.
just so nobody gets intimidated over this thing, studying the Constitution and understanding it is not a hard deal. This notion that we get from law school is that only the 9 people in the Supreme Court really know what the Constitution
these
is.
high priests of the law.
I have been in several legislatures where I have, and it just tears me up. Legislators say, look, let's just go ahead and pass it, and the Supreme Court will tell us whether it's constitutional or not.
Yeah.
No. You took an oath to uphold it, and you don't have to be a brainchild to do this. And a great example of that is this little book right here. This is a book, an elementary book back in 1828, and elementary kids studied this I mean, look at
So they're teaching the Constitution to elementary kids.
You don't
so
wait
these
till you
little
get
kids.
to law school. You don't wait till it's postgraduate stuff. And the kind of stuff that they were having these elementary kids study, the questions they asked.
1828.
1828.
All right, so we're going all the way back. Though this is
Pull
only
out some of the elementary questions.
Okay, so these are
now
questions.
You're an attorney.
These are
You were a legislator.
Now what if I can't answer it? This is going to be bad, which I'm probably not going to be able to. So these are elementary school kids, and they're asking them, can the Congress punish piracy? That is robbery committed at sea, because we have some of that today. So this is actually a good question for today. You know, you got the Somali pirates, that whole movie about the Captain
That's
Phillips.
international law. So can we in America do anything to punish other nations under our Constitution?
Yeah. How many people? I don't know the answer to that question off the top of my head. So what does the elementary catechism say? Yes, and all other crimes committed there, it can also punish offenses against the laws of nations. So there's another question, and in fact, that's the next question. What do you mean by the law of nations? This is great. So this is done in a catechism way where
Look,
you ask one
elementary
question,
kids.
it raises the next question.
That's right, and that's elementary kids. And I bet if you sit down in a law school and take third-year law students that are about to take their bar exam and run those questions through, they won't have. So
no, it talks about mark and reprisal. All of these
and
things.
Nobody knows what that is anymore. And that actually is a very current thing that still goes on because it deals with restitution. It's a form of restitution. So there's a lot in there that's applicable. So do not get intimidated saying, you know, I'm not that smart. You don't have to be smart. Founding fathers, remember, these were average guys. They were farmers. They were shipbuilders. They were, you know, one of these guys was he was a shoe shine guy. He made leather shoes and kept shoes. They're common folks, and they did this for the common, average, everyday person.
So if they could do it, we can do it today.
They can do.
And if kids of yesterday in 1820, little kids could do it. So it was intended as an elementary catechism, but we need it for all of us today.
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
Well, that's the whole idea of Constitution Alive. So when we come back, we're going to actually talk about the seeds of liberty. We're going to dive into some of these materials and talk about what was planted to give us such a successful formula here on Constitution Alive with David Barton and Rick Green.